Hello everyone, it's Ian Robb, and today I'm doing a video on sequencing. So sequencing is a topic that I hear a lot, and I just really want to talk about my thoughts on it and give a basic breakdown of how I approach it. So when I talk about sequencing, what do I mean? What I mean is, how do you approach your turn? For example, it's like being a turn, like your opponent took a knockout. How do you start thinking about things? How do you break down the board? Things like you're looking at it, it's like, what's my goals? Trying to understand that, trying to understand the things that are important, things like what you prize, what you think your opponent prize, what your opponent's think your opponent's hand is, and how do you play your cards? Things like, do you play your Ultra Ball first? Do you play your Vessel first? Things like that. So I personally approach this by, first of all, starting to figure out like what my objective is. For example, my objective might be turn one to get my basics down. That means, maybe I want to try to find extra buddy poffins going second. Maybe I'm trying to Evo. I'm just trying to get as much stuff down as possible. So that's really my goal for the turn. And a lot of this also, I have to add, is matchup dependent and deck dependent. And a lot of this has to be used for what deck you're playing and understanding what are your objectives. And in our version of objective could be like knocking out Gardevoir EX. That's all that matters. If you get Gardevoir EX knocked out, you're in a good spot. It could be more than that, really, depending on the game / situation, but sometimes it's all you need. You need 2 more prizes, boss wins you the game, or like a Marnie's Grimmsnarl plus boss wins you the game, for example. So usually what I do is I try to figure out very quickly that, like, what am I doing? Because I think that if you understand what your plan A is and your plan B is, then the rest of your turns can be a lot easier to play because you know what cards to prioritize and what cards not to prioritize. After that, I really just try to figure out how to maximize odds. What I mean by that is things like sequencing in, like, let's say there's a shuffle stadium in play. It's like, do I shuffle just because I put Iono the cards I want on the bottom? Do I Fez first? Do I Dracloak first? And again, this is very contextual on your game state and hand in matchup. So it's not really something that you can just always know what you're supposed to do. It's really just going to have to come down to experience and learning what is the correct thing to do. I will say usually it's always correct to Fez first unless there's a different objective that you have. Like if you're trying to find Iono, it's really just about drawing cards. The sequencing doesn't matter all that much outside of removing cards from deck to maximize odds. So to go along with that, again, the Iono plus Stadium is very important. I always make sure to tell people to memorize whenever you get Iono'd or you play Iono. Try to get like a good idea of what cards you're putting on bottom so that you can remember if there's good stuff or bad stuff. So you know if like you need to Ultra Ball, you need to use the Artisan, you use a Spike Move Gym. Just is it worth shuffling your deck? Just because maybe it's like you need the boss on bottom, but let's say it's like 6 bad cards, then Artisan isn't helping you. But sometimes it's correct to use something like Artisan to get extra cards. I think that the biggest thing really is to adjust to the crazy situation. So what I mean by that is something like you research and get a hand you didn't expect. Like try to understand, how do I approach these situations, things that are just a little awkward. I think that's one of the most important things in Pokemon, is really just being able to understand, like, okay, I researched this awkward hand, how do I win from here? Or go along with it saying like, oh, I prize 3 dark, 4 dark is Grim, how do I win? So I think a lot of this sequencing is, it's not a perfect science, like I said before. It's a lot about understanding all these little things and understanding how to adjust and understanding matchup strategies. A lot of this can really just be learned just through experience in matchups. I think that's the only thing that gets you there. I think that just doing as much studying as possible just won't really help as much as actually getting the games. And I'm a huge believer in just playing as much Pokemon as possible to be able to improve as much as possible and learn matchup experience, because I think you don't have to play as much as you get better, but I do believe that it takes a lot of games to get better, as I know that took me years before I felt that I was at all good at the game. So again, like I said, it takes a lot of time, but I think it's something very important to understand sequencing, and it's really not just sequencing, but it's matchup knowledge. That's all I have today. If you have any questions, feel free to message me. Until next time, Ian out. Peace.